Most people imagine population changes unfolding slowly, almost like a background process that takes decades to notice. But over just the past 4 years, something truly unusual has taken shape across the United States. Entire communities have been uprooting themselves at a speed the country hasn't witnessed in the modern era. Families are walking away from the zip codes they've held onto for generations. Professionals are stepping back from cities that once shaped their identities and careers. And countless middle-class households are exiting states they fully expected to live in for the rest of their lives. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, this huge reshuffling becomes unmistakable when you look at a measure known as net domestic migration, which simply tracks how many people move into a state from elsewhere in the country versus how many move out. Between April 2020 and July 2024, that metric revealed a transformation on a scale few anticipated. In some states, housing prices have drifted so far away from local incomes that even people with steady, well-paying jobs are finding themselves priced out. In others, everyday costs like taxes, insurance, and basic necessities are climbing faster than wages can reasonably keep up with. And in several regions, years of economic stagnation or growing climate-related risks have finally pushed residents to search for a new sense of stability somewhere else. This countdown explores the 12 states Americans are leaving in the greatest numbers, and, more importantly, the real forces driving those decisions. Some of these states were booming with opportunity not too long ago. Others were viewed as safe, steady, almost picture-perfect places to build a life. But in the span of just a few years, the landscape changed. For many people, staying simply became too costly, too stressful, or too unpredictable. By the time you reach the end of this countdown, you'll have a clear understanding of why millions of Americans are on the move, and how this wave of relocation is reshaping the country's migration patterns for the decade ahead. Number 12. Ohio. Ohio has always carried a reputation for being steady and familiar, the kind of state where people expect life to move at a predictable pace. Yet between April 2020 and July 2024, roughly 38,000 more people moved out of Ohio than moved in. The number isn't shocking at first glance, but it signals a quieter, long-running shift that has been unfolding beneath the surface. A major part of the issue sits in Ohio's old industrial belt. Cities such as Cleveland, Youngstown, and Toledo continue to wrestle with the lingering effects of shuttered factories, hollowed-out downtown districts, and economic slowdowns that never fully rebounded. And while Columbus is expanding and drawing fresh investment, its growth alone isn't powerful enough to offset the steady stream of young adults leaving the state. Many workers in their 20s feel the career ladder is too short at home, so they look toward faster-growing states that offer stronger prospects in tech, healthcare, engineering, logistics, and other high-growth fields. The climate adds another layer of motivation. Persistent gray skies, heavy lake-effect snow, and long frigid winters push plenty of residents to imagine daily life somewhere with more sunshine and fewer heating costs. When people stack up wages, living expenses, and long-term opportunities in the South and West, leaving Ohio often ends up feeling like a practical choice rather than an emotional one. Ohio isn't collapsing by any means, but it is slowly losing momentum to states that appear more energetic, more optimistic, and more financially advantageous for the next chapter of life. Number 11. Minnesota. Minnesota regularly earns high marks in national quality of life rankings. Yet between April 2020 and July 2024, the state still posted a net domestic migration loss of almost 48,000 people. It's a clear example of how a place can shine on paper, but still struggle to convince residents to stay long-term. The Twin Cities region offers plenty: cultural institutions, reputable schools, and major employers. But those perks now come bundled with rising housing prices and some of the steepest combined state and local tax obligations in the Midwest. For many middle-income households, particularly younger couples trying to plan their future, the financial contrast between staying in Minnesota and moving to Wisconsin, the Dakotas, or the Sun Belt has grown wide enough to prompt a serious reevaluation. The climate only intensifies that dilemma. Minnesota winters aren't just chilly, they're drawn out, dim, and punctuated by snowstorms that can dictate the rhythm of everyday life. After years of navigating months of extreme cold, plus the heating bills that come with it, some residents begin imagining a place where winter feels like a manageable season rather than a test of endurance. Conversations about public safety following 2020 also influenced decisions. People have different interpretations of those events, but a segment of the population ultimately concluded that they wanted an environment with less political tension or more predictable policymaking. Minnesota still delivers stability, strong communities, and genuine opportunity. But for a growing number of residents, the balance between what they get and what they pay, financially and emotionally, no longer feels favorable, leading them to pursue a fresh start in another state. Number 10. Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is a place with deep roots, rich history, strong traditions, and communities that take pride in their regional identity. But even with all that, the state still saw roughly 49,000 more people move out than move in between April 2020 and July 2024. The significance isn't just in the number itself, it's in the long-running trend that number continues. For many Pennsylvanians, the careers and opportunities they're chasing simply aren't located in the towns where they grew up. Across the state, older industrial areas like Johnstown, Erie, Scranton, and even portions of Pittsburgh are still wrestling with the lingering impact of the manufacturing collapse that began decades ago. And although certain neighborhoods have carved out pockets of renewal, a lot of younger workers feel the job market doesn't measure up to the fast-growing metro areas in the South or the Mountain West. Once they leave for college or early career opportunities, they're far less likely to come back. Taxes play a meaningful role in the equation too. Pennsylvania's flat income tax may seem reasonable at first glance, but steep property taxes and school district levies can place a heavy strain on household budgets, particularly in communities where wages have barely budged. When you combine that with aging infrastructure, uneven school outcomes, and slower economic expansion, moving away can start to feel less like a risk and more like a practical strategy to stretch a paycheck further. Older residents contribute to the shift as well. Many retirees are opting for warmer climates and friendlier tax structures in states such as Florida or the Carolinas, which adds momentum to the outward migration. Pennsylvania is still a culturally vibrant and deeply rooted state, but the steady stream of departures shows a clear pattern. More and more residents are seeking better affordability, stronger growth, and a sense of forward motion. They feel the state can't fully deliver right now. Number 9. Hawaii. Hawaii is often portrayed as the dream destination. Crystal blue coastlines, dramatic volcanic landscapes, and sunsets that look almost unreal. But for the people who actually live on the islands, reality has become far heavier than the postcard image suggests. Daily life has grown so costly that many longtime residents simply can't maintain a future there. From April 2020 to July 2024, Hawaii experienced a net domestic migration loss of more than 50,000 residents, one of the steepest per capita declines of any state. The core issue is straightforward: housing. Even small, aging homes routinely hit the market at over $1 million, and rental prices have soared far beyond what most local wages can reasonably cover. On top of that, utility bills are among the highest in the nation. Groceries carry the added cost of being shipped across the Pacific, and insurance premiums have climbed sharply. None of this is theoretical. The financial pressure shows up in everyday decisions, from whether to start a family to whether a particular career path is even possible. The job market adds another layer of complication. Tourism drives much of Hawaii's economy, and while it provides steady employment, it doesn't offer many pathways for long-term advancement. For young people seeking growth in fields like technology, finance, engineering, or other specialized industries, the mainland offers far more promising options. Many leave reluctantly, fully aware that once they go, returning may be financially out of reach. This tension, deep love for the islands mixed with the inability to afford life there, has created a slow but unmistakable exodus. Thousands of former residents have headed to places like California, Washington, Nevada, and Texas in search of stability and affordability. Hawaii is still a place of breathtaking beauty, but for countless locals, that beauty no longer outweighs the cost of staying. Number 8. Michigan. Michigan has been putting in serious effort to reinvent itself, and several cities are genuinely showing signs of momentum. Even so, between April 2020 and July 2024, the state still posted a net domestic migration loss of nearly 68,000 people. It's a clear signal that while revitalization is happening, long-standing challenges continue to nudge residents toward the exit. A major part of Michigan's struggle stems from its industrial past. Detroit may no longer represent the symbol of decline it once did, but many smaller cities and rural areas haven't bounced back from decades of auto industry layoffs and manufacturing contraction. Outside a handful of thriving metros, job growth is inconsistent, leaving many young adults feeling like they must leave the state to find faster-paced career advancement. The climate often pushes the decision along. Michigan winters are famously harsh, months of heavy snowfall, freezing temperatures, icy roads, and high heating bills that test both patience and finances. When people compare that to the warmer climates of the South and West, where job markets are expanding and housing is frequently more affordable, relocating can start to feel like a smart, long-term choice rather than a gamble. To be fair, cities like Grand Rapids and Ann Arbor stand out as dynamic hubs with strong industries and vibrant communities. But taken as a whole, these bright spots aren't yet strong enough to counterbalance the population losses occurring throughout older, less economically diverse regions. Michigan remains a state with deep pride, rich history, and considerable potential. Still, many residents are deciding that the momentum they want for their future is taking shape somewhere else. Number 7. Maryland. Maryland is one of those states that, at first glance, seems like it should be attracting people rather than losing them. It boasts some of the highest median incomes in the country, strong public schools in many suburban areas, and the advantage of sitting right next to Washington, D.C., a region packed with federal agencies, tech firms, and stable employment. Yet between April 2020 and July 2024, more than 120,000 residents moved out, giving Maryland one of the largest domestic outflows in the Mid-Atlantic. The main driver behind this trend is the rising cost of living. The Washington-Baltimore corridor has grown increasingly expensive, and housing prices have reached levels that leave many middle-class families feeling squeezed. When you factor in rising property taxes, surging insurance rates, and the high cost of childcare, the strain becomes even more pronounced. Even households earning comfortable salaries often discover that those same paychecks reach much farther in states with a lower overall cost structure. Traffic quietly plays its own role as well. Daily commutes along the Beltway or I-95 can easily steal hours from a person's week, and the constant congestion wears people down over time. For many, the stress eventually outweighs the convenience of living near major job hubs. Remote work only intensified the trend. Once people realized they could keep their federal, tech, or consulting jobs without living in Maryland, the door swung open for moves to places like the Carolinas, Florida, Texas, or even more affordable nearby areas, such as West Virginia. Maryland still provides stability, access to powerful institutions, and robust career opportunities. But the combination of steep expenses and relentless traffic has pushed many families to conclude that their quality of life and their finances would fare better in another state. Number 6. Louisiana. Louisiana has a character all its own. Its music, cuisine, festivals, and cultural traditions create a sense of identity that's impossible to replicate anywhere else in the country. But despite that richness, the state lost around 129,000 residents between April 2020 and July 2024, a huge domestic outflow for a state of its size. And the reasons behind this trend are difficult to overlook. A major part of the strain comes from long-term economic challenges. Louisiana faces some of the highest poverty rates in the nation, limited pathways for upward mobility, and a job market that leans heavily on petrochemical plants, port operations, and tourism. These industries generate revenue, but they don't consistently produce the broad, stable middle-class opportunities needed to keep people rooted. As a result, many young adults are eyeing states like Texas, Georgia, or even parts of the Midwest, places where wages tend to grow faster and career prospects feel more reliable. Public safety plays a significant role as well. Cities such as New Orleans and Baton Rouge have battled elevated violent crime rates for years, prompting families to search for safer, more predictable communities. When you combine that with aging public infrastructure and uneven school quality, the motivation to move becomes even stronger. But the issue that especially separates Louisiana from many other states is its vulnerability to climate risks. Hurricane seasons have become more destructive, insurance premiums have skyrocketed, and ongoing coastal erosion continues to swallow entire communities along the Gulf. For many residents, the cycle of rebuilding after repeated storms has simply become untenable. emotionally, financially, or both. Louisiana remains an energetic, culturally rich state. But the overlapping pressures of economic instability, safety concerns, and escalating climate threats have convinced many people that their best chance at a secure future lies somewhere else. Number 5. Massachusetts. Massachusetts is often seen as one of the intellectual and economic engines of the country. With its world-renowned universities, leading hospitals, and consistently high salaries, it stands out as a powerhouse state. Yet between April 2020 and July 2024, more than 162,000 residents left Massachusetts for other parts of the country. And the main reason is hard to miss. For many people, the cost of living has simply grown too steep to manage. Housing illustrates this more clearly than anything else. During the early pandemic years, home prices in many greater Boston communities surged at a staggering pace, jumping more than 20% in 2021 and climbing even higher in 2022, with some areas exceeding 30% growth. Even well-paid professionals struggled to keep up. Recent analyses show that a buyer now needs a household income far above $160,000 just to qualify for a starter home anywhere near Boston. Renters aren't catching a break either. Monthly rents in Massachusetts rank among the highest in the Northeast, adding another layer of financial strain. And housing isn't the only expense out of line. Everyday necessities, from groceries and utilities to insurance and transit, regularly run above national averages. For families juggling student loan payments, childcare costs, or elder care responsibilities, the overall financial burden can quickly become overwhelming. The rise of remote work poured fuel on the trend. Once employees realized they could keep their Boston-based jobs while living in a less expensive state, places like New Hampshire, Maine, Florida, and the Carolinas became increasingly appealing. Massachusetts still offers tremendous opportunity, innovation, and cultural energy. But for a growing number of residents, the quest for a more affordable and less pressure-filled life has led them to start fresh somewhere else. Number 4. New Jersey. New Jersey has plenty of advantages on paper. Easy access to both New York City and Philadelphia, high-performing suburban school districts, and a diverse economy that supports a wide range of careers. Yet despite these strengths, the state lost more than 192,000 residents between April 2020 and July 2024 through net domestic migration. That places New Jersey near the very top of the list of states people are moving away from. And the reasons behind that trend are both predictable and hard to ignore. The most powerful contributing factor is property taxes. New Jersey consistently holds the title for the highest property taxes of any state, with many homeowners effectively paying what amounts to a second mortgage every year. When you add sky-high home prices, costly insurance premiums, and some of the most expensive commuting expenses in the Northeast, even families with good incomes can feel financially strained. For many households, the numbers only work if everyone is earning at full speed. And even then, it can feel like they're barely keeping pace. The shift to remote work reshaped the situation even more dramatically. Once people realized they didn't need to be within daily commuting distance of New York or Philadelphia, the calculus changed overnight. Thousands of former New Jersey residents packed up and resettled in Pennsylvania, the Carolinas, Florida, Texas, and other more affordable regions. In many cases, the difference in monthly costs amounted to several $1,000s, a gap large enough to turn relocation into a straightforward, financially driven choice. New Jersey still provides safety, strong communities, and excellent educational options. But maintaining that lifestyle comes with a price tag that more and more residents decide isn't sustainable. Number 3. Illinois. Illinois has been watching its population shrink for more than 10 years, and the newest data confirms that the trend isn't easing up. Between April 2020 and July 2024, the state experienced a net domestic migration loss of over 418,000 people, one of the biggest outflows in the entire country. And unlike states where numbers rise and fall from year to year, Illinois' decline has turned into a long-term pattern rooted in deeper structural problems. A central issue is the overall cost of living, especially when it comes to property taxes. Illinois routinely ranks near the top in the nation for property tax burdens, and that weight falls heavily on homeowners. Middle-income families often discover they're paying far more than they would across the border in places like Indiana or Iowa. where both taxes and housing costs are substantially lower. For many, the financial trade-off simply doesn't make sense anymore. Chicago adds another layer of complexity. The city remains a major cultural and economic force, but residents frequently point to concerns about crime, uneven neighborhood investment, and rising city expenses as motivations to move. Remote work accelerated this shift even more. People who once commuted downtown every day suddenly realized they no longer needed to be tied to Chicago's cost structure or the high prices found throughout much of the metro area. And for others, the choice is even simpler. Their money goes 2 or 3 times farther somewhere else. The state also continues to grapple with long-term financial challenges, especially its sizable pension commitments. These obligations limit Illinois' ability to reduce taxes or expand public services, creating a sense of uncertainty about the future. For many families, that uncertainty becomes yet another reason to look elsewhere for stability. Illinois still has enormous strengths: cultural richness, a diverse economy, and some of the most respected institutions in the world. But so far, none of those assets have been enough to slow the persistent outflow of people seeking a more affordable and predictable future in another state. Number 2. New York. New York is still one of the most iconic and influential places on the planet, but its population trends tell a very different story than its global reputation suggests. Between April 2020 and July 2024, the state saw a net domestic migration loss of about 966,000 people, second only to one other state. And what makes this especially notable is the type of residents leaving: middle-class families, longtime New Yorkers, and even higher-earning professionals who once thought they'd never build a life anywhere else. Affordability sits at the heart of the problem. Housing costs, particularly in New York City and its surrounding suburbs, have pushed far beyond what many households can realistically manage. Renters, too, are feeling the squeeze as monthly prices climb faster than wages. When you combine sky-high taxes, expensive insurance, steep transportation costs, and some of the priciest childcare in the country, the financial weight becomes impossible for many people to carry long-term. Quality of life concerns also play a meaningful role. New York City continues to pull in ambitious young professionals and global talent. But many longtime residents describe feeling worn down by rising disorder, exhausting commutes, and the constant pressure of living in one of the most intense urban environments in the world. For some, the idea of moving to a state with more space, a slower pace, and far lower costs suddenly becomes very appealing. Remote work amplified this movement dramatically. Once employees realized they could hold on to New York-based jobs without physically living in the state, relocation became an easy option. States like Florida, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and even parts of New Jersey began absorbing former New Yorkers seeking better affordability and more room to grow. New York remains culturally unmatched, endlessly creative, and globally magnetic. But the sheer size of its population loss shows just how difficult it has become for everyday residents to build long-term stability in a state where the costs keep rising and the breathing room keeps shrinking. Number 1. California. California still represents the dream for many people. Waves crashing along the coast, snow-capped mountains in the distance, world-leading industries, and weather that feels almost tailored for human comfort. Yet from April 2020 to July 2024, the reality on the ground told a very different story. During that period, more than 134,000 residents left for other states, giving California the largest domestic outflow in the nation by a massive margin. No other state even comes close. The main driver behind this exodus is unmistakable: housing. In many coastal cities, the price of a typical home has climbed so high that even well-paid professionals feel like they're constantly falling behind. Renters face similar pressure, often paying monthly amounts that would cover a mortgage in far more affordable parts of the country. When you combine these costs with steep state income taxes, high utility bills, rising insurance premiums, and the general expense of day-to-day life, it's no surprise that middle-class families feel squeezed from every angle. Quality of life concerns only intensify the situation. Long, grinding commutes, wildfire seasons that seem to grow more disruptive each year, recurring drought worries, and the emotional weight of living in a place where costs rise faster than wages all push residents to rethink their long-term plans. The rise of remote work removed the last obstacle. Once people realized they could keep their California-level salaries while paying far less to live somewhere else, the pace of departures surged. People aren't leaving because California lacks beauty or opportunity. Those strengths remain. They are leaving because they want a version of the California lifestyle that doesn't require constant financial strain. And that is what puts California firmly at the top of this list. The largest outflow, the most dramatic shift, and the clearest sign of how cost pressures are reshaping where Americans choose to live. The patterns emerging from these 12 states point to a shared conclusion. People aren't moving on a whim. They're relocating for stability, affordability, and a future they can realistically sustain. Housing prices, tax burdens, insurance spikes, and shifting job markets are redefining where families believe they can build a secure life. Each move represents a deeply personal decision. Yet together, these choices add up to one of the most significant internal migration shifts the country has seen in decades. States gaining population will face new pressures to expand housing, transportation, and public services. Meanwhile, states losing residents will have to confront tough questions about budgets, infrastructure, and long-term economic strategy. Migration is already reshaping politics, business investment, and the geography of opportunity itself. Understanding these forces isn't just helpful, it's essential for seeing the future clearly. So let me ask you, which of these states surprised you the most? And would you ever relocate for a better quality of life? If this deep dive brought new insight into America's changing landscape, tap subscribe so you never miss another breakdown of the forces shaping the country's future.